The timer chimed sharply, echoing through the kitchen like a warning bell. Evan Morton didn't flinch, his hand steady as he pulled the roasted chicken from the oven. The aroma of garlic and rosemary filled the air, a perfect harmony of flavors carefully prepared for the ritual Thursday family dinner. But tonight, the air felt different, tense, heavy with something unspoken. From the dining table, Megan's voice rang out, casual, yet carrying an edge of hesitance. "Dad, is it okay if I spread my calculus homework out here? The coffee table's too small. Just make sure you clear it off before dinner." Evan replied without looking up, his knife already slicing through crisp red peppers with practiced precision. Megan's voice should have been a comforting backdrop to the quiet evening. But lately, everything felt slightly off. The sound of a car door closing outside made Evan pause mid-slice. Through the kitchen window, he saw Lisa step out of her car. She smoothed her navy pencil skirt, the one he'd always admired on her, and hesitated before heading up the driveway. Her expression was hard to read, but something about her appearance tugged at a thread of unease in Evan's chest. Her makeup looked fresh, too perfect for someone returning home after a long day. She pushed a strand of hair behind her ear, her fingers lingering on the gesture. "Mom's home." Megan's chair scraped against the floor as she rose, but Evan said nothing. He kept his eyes on the cutting board, though his mind buzzed with unspoken questions. The door opened, and Lisa's voice drifted into the room, too light, too cheerful. "Something smells amazing." "Her crusted chicken," Evan said, studying her from the corner of his eye. Her smile seemed forced, the brightness in her tone hollow. "You're late," he added. "Traffic was terrible." Lisa waved a hand dismissively, avoiding his gaze. "I'm going to change before dinner." "Mom." Megan intercepted her with a textbook in hand, her words tumbling out quickly. "Can you help me decide what to wear to Emily's party? I was thinking about that new dress we saw at the mall." "In a bit, sweetie." Lisa's smile warmed as she turned to their daughter, her earlier stiffness melting away. "Give me 15 minutes." Evan watched as Lisa disappeared upstairs, her heels clicking against the hardwood. Each step seemed to amplify the uneasy rhythm in his chest. He turned back to the peppers, trying to refocus on his task, but the weight of suspicion pressed down harder. "Dad?" Megan's voice startled him. She stood at the kitchen island, watching him intently. "Is everything okay? With you and Mom? I mean..." The knife froze mid-cut. Megan's tone held something deeper, a quiet vulnerability that stopped Evan cold. He met her gaze, seeing for the first time the worry behind her curious eyes. "What makes you ask that?" he said, his voice deliberately neutral. Megan hesitated, her finger tracing idle patterns on the granite countertop. "She's just different. I don't know. And you've been tense lately, like you're waiting for something bad to happen." Before Evan could respond, Lisa's footsteps announced her return. He turned, his unease spiking as he saw her. Instead of her usual comfortable loungewear, Lisa wore a form-fitting blue dress, the kind she'd save for special occasions. Her hair was styled, her makeup immaculate. The pearls he'd given her on their anniversary gleamed at her throat. "You're dressed up," he said flatly, setting the knife down. "I thought you were changing into something comfortable." "This is comfortable," Lisa replied, but the fingers fiddling with her wedding ring betrayed her nervousness. "I just felt like dressing up." "Is that a crime?" "No crime." Evan's words were measured, but the weight of his gaze pinned her in place. "Just unexpected." Megan shifted uncomfortably, gathering her textbooks. "I'll clear the table," she mumbled, retreating to the dining room. Evan stayed silent as Lisa moved around the kitchen, her movements uncharacteristically clumsy. Plates clinked together too loudly as she set the table. "Do you need help with anything?" Lisa asked, her tone unnaturally bright. "I've got it under control." Evan's hands were steady as he returned to chopping, but inside, something simmered. "You seem nervous about something." "Nervous?" Lisa laughed, but the sound was brittle. "Don't be silly. I just think we should have a family discussion over dinner." The knife paused midair. Evan turned to her, his face unreadable. "A discussion about what?" Lisa's smile faltered. "It's nothing bad. Just something I think we need to talk about as a family." Evan's jaw tightened, his earlier unease solidifying into dread. 20 years of marriage had taught him to read between the lines. This wasn't just a discussion. This was a reckoning. "All right then," he said, his voice cool. "Let's talk." The dining room felt colder than usual, the dim glow of the chandelier casting sharp shadows across the table. Megan sat between her parents, fiddling with her fork as the heavy silence stretched. Evan occupied his usual seat at the head of the table, his movements deliberate as he served the food. Lisa sat to his right, shifting slightly in her chair, her eyes darting toward Megan before settling back on her plate. Megan cleared her throat, forcing a cheerful tone. "Mrs. Harrison gave us this ridiculous physics problem today. Nobody in class could solve it, but I figured it out. She said my solution was, I want an open marriage." The words dropped into the room like a bomb, slicing through Megan's sentence and the carefully cultivated normalcy of the moment. The clink of silverware froze. Megan's fork clattered against her plate, the sound unnaturally loud in the silence that followed. Evan's hand paused mid-reach for his glass, his grip tightening until his knuckles turned white. Slowly, deliberately, he set the glass back down on the table without taking a sip. He turned his head toward Lisa, his expression calm, but his eyes dark, unreadable. "What did you just say?" His voice was low, steady, a blade unsheathed but not yet swung. Lisa sat straighter in her chair, the flush creeping up her neck, belying her feigned confidence. "I've been thinking about this for a while," she said, her voice trembling at first but gaining strength as she continued. "I love you, Evan. I love the life we've built together, but something's missing. I need to feel something new, something different." "Different," Evan repeated, the word cutting through the air. "And by different, you mean sleeping with other people?" "It's not just about sex," Lisa insisted, her voice growing more desperate. "It's about rediscovering myself, about being honest with each other about what we need." "What you need," Evan interrupted, his tone sharp. "Not what we need. What you need." Lisa faltered but pressed on. "I'm not saying we should end our marriage. I think this could actually strengthen our relationship. Make us more." "Stop." Evan held up a hand, silencing her. His jaw clenched tightly as he leaned back in his chair, his gaze piercing. "Let's get to the point. Is there someone already?" Lisa's breath hitched, and her fingers fidgeted with her wedding ring. A tell Evan recognized instantly. Her silence was damning. "Who is it?" he demanded, his voice cold now, void of any pretense of calm. Megan's wide eyes darted between her parents, her chest rising and falling rapidly. "Mom," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Tell him." Lisa swallowed hard, her hands shaking as she set her fork down. "His name is Derek. He's someone I met at the charity event last month." Evan's laugh was harsh, almost bitter. "The charity event," he said, shaking his head. "The one I missed because I was closing a deal to keep this family's lifestyle intact. And while I was doing that, you were connecting with Derek." "It's not like that," Lisa said quickly. "Nothing has happened. We've just talked. I wanted to discuss this with you before." "Before what?" Evan's voice rose slightly, his control beginning to crack. "Before you slept with him? Before you destroyed our family?" "Dad, please," Megan interjected, her voice breaking. "Let's just calm down." Evan turned to her, his eyes narrowing. "Calm down? Did you know about this?" The question landed like a slap, and Megan recoiled. "No," she stammered, but her hesitation betrayed her. "I mean, not really." Evan's gaze hardened, and he leaned forward. "How long?" Megan looked down at her lap, her voice barely audible. "A few weeks. She talked to me about her feelings. I just thought." "You just thought you'd help her cheat on her husband?" Evan's words were sharp, cutting. "You thought you'd play lookout for your mother's betrayal." Tears filled Megan's eyes, spilling over as she shook her head. "I didn't mean—" "Enough." Evan pushed his chair back, the sound of the legs scraping against the hardwood making both Lisa and Megan flinch. He stood slowly, towering over them as his fury simmered just beneath the surface. "You've made your choices. Both of you." "Evan, please," Lisa pleaded, standing as well. "I'm trying to be honest with you, to save what we have." Evan pointed a finger at her, his expression colder than Megan had ever seen. "Save it? You think honesty after the fact saves anything? You don't get to betray me and call it honesty." Megan reached for his arm, her voice cracking. "Dad, please don't do this. We're still a family. We can fix this." He looked down at her, and for a moment, the hardness in his eyes softened. But then his gaze flicked back to Lisa, and the coldness returned. "No, Megan," he said quietly, pulling his arm away. "This is the moment everything broke. You'll both remember it well." Without another word, Evan turned and walked out of the room, leaving his overturned chair behind. The sound of his office door closing reverberated through the house, sealing him away from the wreckage. Evan sat in the darkened confines of his home office, his fingers resting lightly on the edge of the desk. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the soft hum of the air conditioner and the faint sounds of muffled sobs coming from downstairs. His jaw was tight, his mind replaying Lisa's words over and over again like a broken record. "I need to feel something different." Her declaration had been a knife to the gut, twisting deeper with every detail she revealed. Derek, the charity event, Megan's complicity. Each piece fit together into a grotesque puzzle, mocking the life he had spent 20 years building. His eyes landed on the framed family photo that had stood on his desk for years. A summer vacation on the beach, their smiles wide, their arms wrapped around each other. The memory now felt like a cruel joke. With deliberate movements, Evan opened the bottom drawer of his desk and placed the photo frame inside, face down. The thud of the drawer closing felt final, like a gravestone marking the death of the life he thought he knew. The house became eerily quiet over the following days, the tension palpable in every interaction. Evan maintained a facade of normalcy, going about his routines with mechanical precision. He rose early, dressed impeccably for work, and left before Lisa or Megan woke up. At the office, he buried himself in tasks, working through every break and deflecting all non-essential conversations. His colleagues noticed the change. Evan Morton, known for his approachable demeanor and sharp wit, had become a silent storm, intense, focused, and utterly unyielding. When his assistant cautiously asked if everything was all right, he gave a clipped, "I'm fine," and waved her off. At home, the distance grew into a chasm. Meals were silent affairs, punctuated only by the clink of silverware. Lisa made a few attempts to engage him, but each effort was met with cool indifference. Megan barely spoke, her guilt weighing heavily on her young shoulders. "Dad," she ventured one evening as Evan sat on the couch, flipping through emails on his phone. "Can we talk? About everything?" Without looking up, Evan replied, "I have nothing to say." Megan hesitated, wringing her hands. I didn't mean to hurt you. I thought I was helping Mom. She seemed so unhappy. And Stop," Evan said sharply, his eyes finally meeting hers. "You made a choice, Megan, just like your mother did. Now you get to live with the consequences." Tears welled in her eyes, but Evan turned back to his phone, signaling the end of the conversation. Lisa announced her date with Derek during dinner on Wednesday evening. The words hung in the air like smoke, acrid and choking. "It's just dinner," she said, her tone defensive. "I'll be home by midnight." "Of course you will," Evan said, his voice devoid of emotion. He speared a piece of chicken with his fork, his movements unhurried. "Wouldn't want to turn into a pumpkin." "Dad," Megan interjected, her voice pleading. Evan's gaze flicked to her, cold and unyielding. "Your mother deserves all the support you've been giving her, Megan. I'm sure you'll help her pick the perfect dress for Derek." Megan flinched, her eyes darting to Lisa, whose confident smile faltered. "Evan," Lisa began, but he stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I have work to do." He left them at the table, their meals half-eaten, their expressions painted with doubt. That night, Evan sat in his office, the soft glow of his computer screen illuminating his face. The papers he had prepared over the past week lay in a neat stack on his desk. Asset transfer forms, preliminary divorce filings, and financial documentation. His lawyer had been meticulous, ensuring every step of the process was airtight. With a few keystrokes, Evan initiated the first wave of account transfers, draining the joint accounts and redirecting funds into accounts solely under his name. He paused only once, his cursor hovering over the investment account earmarked for Megan's college fund. His chest tightened as he thought of his daughter, her tear-streaked face flashing in his mind. But the memory of her standing beside Lisa, defending her actions, hardened his resolve. With a decisive click, he transferred the funds. When he finally shut down his computer, the house was silent. He could hear the faint murmurs of Lisa and Megan talking upstairs, their voices muffled but unmistakably conspiratorial. The sound only fueled the fire burning in his chest. Evan came home early on Friday, his movements calm and measured. The house buzzed with nervous energy as Lisa and Megan moved through the rooms, their voices carrying fragments of conversation. "Mom, the black dress definitely," Megan said, her tone eager. "You don't think it's too much?" Lisa asked, her voice uncertain. "No, it's perfect. Derek won't know what hit him." Evan's grip on his briefcase tightened as he walked past the open bedroom door, catching a glimpse of Lisa adjusting her dress in the mirror. Her hair was styled the way he'd always liked, and the pearls he'd given her glinted against her skin. She turned and spotted him in the hallway. "Oh, Evan," she said, her voice light. "I'm glad you're home." He kept walking, shutting himself in his office without a word. The hours ticked by with agonizing slowness. Evan sat at his desk, the divorce papers now resting in a sealed envelope. At 7:30, he heard the front door close and the hum of Lisa's car engine as she drove away. He stood and moved to the window, watching the taillights disappear down the street. His expression was unreadable, but his jaw clenched tightly as he turned back to his desk. Picking up his phone, he dialed his lawyer. "Everything is ready," he said. His voice was calm, almost serene. "File it first thing Monday morning." Lisa's heart raced as she pulled into the parking lot of La Maison, the upscale restaurant where she was meeting Derek. The place held a bittersweet nostalgia. It was where Evan had proposed to her years ago. The irony wasn't lost on her, but she pushed the thought aside, focusing on the excitement she hoped to feel tonight. Derek was already waiting inside, seated at a corner table. He greeted her with a broad smile, standing to pull out her chair. "Lisa, you look stunning," he said, his eyes lingering on her in a way that made her stomach churn, though she forced herself to smile back. "Thank you," she replied, smoothing her dress as she sat down. The soft glow of candlelight illuminated the space between them, but Lisa found herself feeling uncomfortably exposed under Derek's gaze. The evening began smoothly enough, with wine and polite conversation. Derek charmed her with stories about his work and his travels, but something about his tone felt rehearsed, calculated. Lisa tried to ignore the nagging discomfort growing in her chest. Halfway through dinner, Derek leaned back in his chair, swirling his glass of wine with an air of smug confidence. "You know," he began, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone, "you're not the first married woman I've been with." Lisa blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me?" Derek chuckled, taking a slow sip of his wine. "It's a bit of a hobby of mine. Married women. They're unique. Always looking for something they're missing at home." Lisa's stomach turned. "That's not why I'm here." "No." Derek raised an eyebrow, his smirk widening. "You're here, dressed like that, wearing those pearls, meeting me for a romantic dinner. What exactly did you expect?" His words hit her like a slap, and for a moment, she couldn't breathe. Her mind raced back to Evan, to the dinner table, to the hurt in his eyes. "What have I done?" "I think this was a mistake," Lisa said, her voice trembling as she reached for her purse. "I should go." But Derek wasn't done. He leaned forward, his tone turning mocking. "Oh, come on, Lisa. Don't act like you're some innocent wife who got lost on her way home. You wanted this. You wanted me." Lisa stood abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. Other diners turned to look, their curious gazes burning her with shame. Derek leaned back, an amused expression on his face as he watched her flounder. "Enjoy your evening, Derek," she said, her voice shaking but firm. As she hurried out of the restaurant, tears blurred her vision. Her chest ached with a mix of anger, regret, and humiliation. She stumbled to her car, fumbling with her keys as sobs began to rack her body. The house was dark and silent when Lisa returned. She turned the key carefully, hoping not to wake Megan or alert Evan, though she doubted he'd care. As she stepped inside, the oppressive weight of her guilt pressed down on her. "Megan," she called softly, but there was no response. She climbed the stairs, her heels clicking against the hardwood, and peeked into Megan's room. The door was ajar, the glow of the television reflecting off the walls. Megan lay on her side, her back to the door. "Sweetheart," Lisa whispered, but Megan didn't stir. Lisa's heart ached as she closed the door gently. The master bedroom was just as she'd left it. Evan's side of the bed was untouched, the sheets smooth and cold. She sank onto the edge of the mattress, her fingers brushing the pearls at her neck. For years, they had symbolized love and commitment. Now they felt like a noose. She pulled out her phone, desperate to reach Evan. Evan sat at his desk, watching the last financial transaction complete on his computer. He'd systematically dismantled the life he and Lisa had built together, piece by piece. Their joint accounts were empty. The credit cards were canceled. The investment accounts, including Megan's college fund, had been transferred to his name. The final item on his list was the envelope containing the divorce papers, addressed to Lisa. It sat on the corner of the desk, a simple but devastating symbol of the end. His phone buzzed on the desk, the screen lighting up with Lisa's name. He didn't answer. A series of texts followed in rapid succession. "Lisa, Evan, please pick up. I need to talk to you." "Lisa, I made a terrible mistake. Derek he's not who I thought he was." "Lisa, I'm home. Please, can we talk?" Evan stared at the screen, his expression cold. With a swipe of his thumb, he deleted the messages one by one. The following morning dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the chaos brewing inside the Morton household. Lisa woke to the sound of Megan's voice calling for her from downstairs. "Mom?" Megan's tone was high-pitched, panicked. Lisa rushed downstairs, her robe pulled tightly around her. "What is it, honey?" Megan stood in the doorway of Evan's office, holding an envelope. Her face was pale, her hands trembling as she handed it to Lisa. "What is this?" Lisa asked, though her stomach already churned with dread. She opened the envelope, pulling out the divorce papers and a letter written in Evan's neat, precise handwriting. Her eyes scanned the words, each one striking her like a blow. "Lisa, by the time you read this, our accounts will be empty and the credit cards canceled. The house is in my name. I've ensured that Megan will have enough to finish school, but you will not see another penny from me. You made your choice, and now I've made mine. My lawyer will contact you on Monday to finalize the divorce. This is the price of your freedom. Evan." Lisa sank into the desk chair, her hands shaking. Megan's voice broke through her shock. "He's gone, Mom," Megan whispered. "His car is gone. His clothes, his tools, everything." Lisa stared at the papers in her hands, her mind reeling. She had gambled everything, her marriage, her family, and lost. The Morton house, once a lively home filled with laughter and warmth, now felt like a tomb. Lisa sat in Evan's office chair, the divorce papers trembling in her hands as Megan paced back and forth, her movements frantic. "He's really gone," Megan said, her voice cracking. "He didn't even say goodbye." Lisa couldn't find words. Her thoughts were a chaotic swirl of disbelief, guilt, and regret. Her eyes scanned Evan's letter again, lingering on the words, "This is the price of your freedom." "Mom," Megan said sharply, breaking Lisa's trance. "What do we do now? The bank accounts? I tried to check, and everything's gone." Lisa swallowed hard. I don't know." Megan's expression twisted into a mixture of anger and despair. "You don't know? You don't know? You destroyed everything, and now you don't know." "Megan, I didn't mean for this to happen," Lisa said, her voice shaking. "I thought." "You thought what?" Megan snapped, tears streaming down her face. "That you could play around with some random guy and Dad would just be okay with it? That I'd be okay with it?" Lisa stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I made a mistake, all right? I know that now. A mistake." Megan's voice rose. "No, Mom. Forgetting an anniversary is a mistake. Burning dinner is a mistake. What we did, wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. And now Dad's gone, and we're left with nothing. Lisa's breath caught in her throat as Megan's words sank in. Before she could respond, Megan stormed out of the office, slamming the door behind her. The sound echoed through the empty house, a harsh reminder of how fractured their lives had become. Across town, Evan sat in his new apartment, surrounded by sleek, modern furnishings that felt sterile and impersonal. The space was quiet, too quiet, but he welcomed the solitude. It was a stark contrast to the house he had left behind, with its constant buzz of family life and now betrayal. Evan's phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced at the screen to see a message from his lawyer. Divorce papers were delivered this morning. Let me know if you'd like to expedite the next steps. Evan stared at the message for a moment before typing a curt reply. Proceed. He set the phone down and leaned back in his chair, his gaze drifting to the large windows overlooking the city skyline. His chest felt heavy with a mix of relief and sorrow. He had done everything he could to secure his own future and sever ties with the past, but the emptiness lingered. Days turned into weeks, and the full weight of Evan's departure settled over Lisa and Megan like a dark cloud. The financial reality hit hard. Evan's letter had been brutally clear, and the joint accounts were indeed empty. The mortgage was overdue, and utility bills piled up on the kitchen counter. Lisa tried calling Derek, desperate for some form of support, but his number had been disconnected. A pit of dread formed in her stomach as she realized how completely he had used her. "Mom," Megan said one morning, sliding an envelope across the table. "This came for you." Lisa opened it, her heart sinking as she read the letter from the bank. Foreclosure proceedings were underway. Tears blurred her vision as she looked at Megan. "We'll figure this out. We'll find a way." Megan's laugh was bitter. "Find a way? Like how? You can't even pay the electric bill, Mom. We're losing the house, and you're still acting like everything's going to be okay." Lisa reached for her daughter's hand, but Megan pulled away. "Don't touch me," she said coldly. "I can't even look at you right now." One evening, Lisa returned home from a humiliating day of job hunting to find Megan packing a suitcase in her room. "What are you doing?" Lisa asked, panic rising in her chest. "I'm leaving," Megan said without looking up. "Aunt Sarah said I can stay with her. At least she won't lie to me." "Megan, please," Lisa begged, stepping forward. "We can fix this. We just need time." Megan zipped her suitcase with finality and turned to face her mother. "Time won't fix this, Mom. Dad's gone, and it's your fault. And mine, I guess, because I helped you. But I can't stay here anymore. I can't." Lisa's knees buckled, and she sank onto the edge of the bed. "You're my daughter. I can't lose you too." "You already have," Megan said, her voice trembling. "I'll call when I'm settled." Lisa watched helplessly as Megan left, her daughter's departure carving out the last piece of her already broken heart. Meanwhile, Evan thrived in his new life. His promotion at work brought new challenges and rewards, and his colleagues marveled at his renewed focus and drive. He began seeing a young executive, a relationship that was light and uncomplicated, the polar opposite of what he had left behind. But despite his professional and personal success, Evan couldn't shake the lingering emptiness. Late at night, when the city was quiet, he would sit by the window, a drink in hand, and think of Megan. Her betrayal had cut him deeply, but it was the memory of her as a little girl, innocent and full of unconditional love, that haunted him most. He pushed the thoughts away, reminding himself of the cold, hard truth. Trust, once broken, could never be repaired. The day Lisa was forced to leave the house was a grim one. Movers arrived early in the morning, their efficiency a painful contrast to Lisa's sluggish movements as she packed the last remnants of her life into boxes. Her phone buzzed with a text from a former colleague. "Heard Evan got promoted. Looks like he's dating someone new. Thought you should know." Lisa's knees gave out, and she sank to the floor, the weight of her choices crushing her. She had lost everything: her husband, her daughter, her home. And now, even the faint hope of reconciliation with Evan was gone. Lisa's new apartment was a far cry from the spacious family home she had shared with Evan and Megan. It was a cramped one-bedroom studio in a rundown part of town. The walls were bare, the furniture mismatched and secondhand, and the faint smell of mildew lingered no matter how much she cleaned. Her once impeccable wardrobe had been sold off piece by piece to cover basic expenses, leaving her with a meager selection of practical clothing. Each day was a grueling repetition of low-paying work at a retail store, endless bills, and overwhelming loneliness. The pitying looks from her co-workers were almost worse than the job itself. Whispers followed her, fueled by rumors about her fall from grace. Lisa avoided eye contact and kept her head down, her pride long since shattered. One afternoon, during a rare lunch break, Lisa scrolled through her phone, searching for some semblance of connection. Her finger hovered over Megan's name, but she couldn't bring herself to call. Megan's last words to her rang loudly in her mind. "You already lost me." Instead, she typed a text to Evan. "Lisa, Evan, please. Can we talk? I made mistakes, but I want to make things right. For Megan, for us." The message sat unread, like all the others she had sent over the weeks. Lisa stared at her phone, willing a reply that would never come. Megan thrived in the stability of her Aunt Sarah's home, though the scars of her family's collapse remained raw. Sarah's house, while modest, was warm and welcoming, a place where Megan could finally focus on her future without the constant tension and guilt that had suffocated her at home. One evening, while unpacking in her new room, Megan came across an old photo tucked into a textbook, a picture of her, Lisa, and Evan on a family vacation. She stared at it for a long time, her chest tightening with conflicting emotions. She missed her father deeply, but every attempt to contact him had been met with silence. The unanswered letter she had sent to his office was a particularly painful rejection. Yet, part of her still clung to the hope that one day he might forgive her. Evan's new life was efficient, disciplined, and meticulously organized just the way he wanted it. His apartment was spotless, his work schedule full, and his personal life carefully compartmentalized. The young executive he had begun dating was pleasant company, but their relationship remained surface level. Evan avoided anything that hinted at deeper emotions or vulnerability. Late one evening, as he reviewed financial reports for an upcoming meeting, he came across an old family budget spreadsheet. His eyes lingered on a line item labeled Megan's college fund. The memory of her excitedly discussing universities with him surfaced unbidden, and for a moment his stoic mask cracked. He set the report aside and poured himself a drink, staring out the window at the city lights. The question haunted him. Had he been too harsh? Was cutting off Megan entirely justified? He dismissed the thought quickly, hardening his resolve. Betrayal was betrayal. Trust, once shattered, couldn't be mended. Fate had a cruel sense of timing. One afternoon, as Lisa left the grocery store, her arms loaded with bags, she saw him. Evan was across the street, walking with a woman who was laughing at something he'd said. The sight froze Lisa in her tracks. He looked good, better than she remembered. His posture was confident, his suit tailored perfectly, and his expression calm. The woman at his side was young and polished, her hand casually brushing his arm as they talked. Lisa's heart clenched painfully. For a moment, she considered calling out to him, but the weight of her shame kept her rooted in place. Instead, she watched as Evan and the woman entered a cafe together, disappearing from view. That night, Lisa sat in her empty apartment, staring at the pearl necklace Evan had given her years ago. It was the one thing she hadn't sold, though she had considered it many times. The memories it held were too precious and too painful to let go. One day, Evan received a letter from Megan, her handwriting shaky, the words carefully chosen. "Dad, I know I hurt you, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. I was wrong to support Mom, and I know I betrayed your trust. But I'm still your daughter, and I love you. I hope, someday, you can find it in your heart to forgive me. Megan." He read the letter twice, his expression unreadable. For a long time, he sat at his desk, the letter resting in his hands. Then, with deliberate precision, he folded it and placed it in his drawer, next to the divorce papers he had signed months ago. Evan didn't respond. Lisa's life continued its downward spiral. The eviction notice arrived 6 months after Evan left, and she was forced to move into a shelter. Her attempts to rebuild had failed at every turn. Without a safety net or support system, she found herself utterly alone. One evening, she received an email from Derek, drunken, mocking, and devoid of remorse. Derek, hey babe, heard things didn't work out for you. Guess I'm not the only one who doesn't stick around. Still, thanks for the memories. You were number 12 in my collection. Winky face. Lisa deleted the email with trembling hands, her shame and anger boiling over. She sat on the cold floor of the shelter that night, clutching the pearls she still couldn't let go of, sobbing into the silence. Time passed, and the Mortons became distant memories to one another. Megan worked hard to build a new life with her aunt's support, though her father's silence left a permanent scar. Lisa's struggles continued, her days defined by regret and the consequences of her choices. Evan, however, moved forward with purpose. He no longer dwelled on the life he had left behind, though traces of it lingered in quiet moments. An old family photo tucked in a drawer, a random memory that surfaced unbidden. But his resolve remained firm. Betrayal was unforgivable. The life they once shared was gone, leaving only fragments scattered across time. None of them would ever be the same,